Today's gospel comes from Matthew chapter 16. From that time on, after Peter confessed that Jesus was the Messiah, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and undergo great suffering at the hands of the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed, and on the third day be raised. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, "God forbid it, Lord! This must never happen to you." But he turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me, for you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things." Then Jesus told his disciples, "If anyone wants to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit them if they gain the whole world but forfeit their life? Or what will they give in return for their life? For the Son of Man is to come with his angels in the glory of the Father, and then he will repay everyone for what has been done. Truly, I tell you, there are some standing here who will not taste death before they see the Son of Man coming into his kingdom." The Gospel of our Lord.
Praise to you, Lord.
Please be seated. Have you ever had one of those days? One of those days where all of a sudden everything's going great, and you're having victory after victory, and everybody's singing your praises, and people are noticing you, and you're just like on top of the world, right? You ever have one of those days? And then all of a sudden, everything falls apart. Someone bursts your bubble, tragedy strikes, you lose everything that you had accomplished, someone says something really nasty and awful to you, and your whole day's ruined. You ever have one of those days where also you have a high moment and then everything crashes and you have a low moment? Anybody? Is it just me? God, right? Peter, I think, is having one of those days, the Apostle Peter. Today's gospel is part of a story. And because this summer we've been having a worship series on women in the faith, we haven't been following along in the lectionary, or this lectionary, we were doing the narrative lectionary. And so, because of that, we're jumping right in the middle. So I want to just give you just a little bit of background here. Jesus has had a series of dialogues with the Pharisees, and we all have heard these before, where they've been very frustrated, where they've tried to manipulate him and try and twist his words. And Jesus has not been very disgruntled with them. And so he turns to the disciples and says to them, "Beware of the yeast of the Pharisees. Beware of their teaching and how it can just undermine everything about your faith." The disciples don't really get it, but they kind of do it. And they ask Jesus, and Jesus gets frustrated with them because they can't understand. And so finally Jesus says to them as they enter this new city, because they're talking as they travel, "Who do you say I am, Peter?" And Peter gets the answer right. He says, "You're the Messiah. You're the Savior of the world." And all of a sudden, I can just picture the scene. Jesus, his eyes light up, and he's got this big smile. He goes, "Yes, finally, you get it!" And the disciples are all probably turning to each other, giving each other high fives, because finally they answered the question right. And Peter's got to be feeling good, right? Excuse me. Peter has got to be feeling great about this, because, Jesus then turns to him and says, "You are no longer Simon, you are Peter. You are the rock. On you, I'm going to build my church." Whoa! Peter's head's got to be like this big, right? Because all of a sudden, Jesus is saying, "You got it. You're right. You're on the right path. You are going to be someone who I'm going to use. You're going to be this incredible leader in my church." And then immediately, Jesus begins to say, "Okay, so what this means is now that you've figured out who I am, I'm going to have to die. I'm going to have to be tortured and humiliated, suffer for 3 days, and then die on a cross." And before he can get the words that raised from the dead out of his mouth, Peter responds by saying, "No, that's not it, God. That's not it, Jesus, sorry. Forget that. No, that's never going to happen. We cannot have any more talk about you dying." And immediately, everything just falls apart for Peter. Jesus is so distraught at the seriousness of what Peter says that he turns to him and says, "Get behind me, Satan." Now, I don't know about you, but there's some harsh words you can say to somebody. But "get behind me, Satan" has got to rank up there. It's pretty high, right? Peter. He goes from being in the same dialogue, the same conversation, he goes from way up here being, you're Peter, you're the rock upon which I'm going to build my church, to get behind me, Satan. That's a far way to fall in the midst of just one day, one conversation. But it shows us how serious this attitude that Peter has, how damaging it is to his faith. And Jesus says, it's one of those things as a parent, you got to take a hard line with your child, right? Because you got to say, no, you can't keep doing this, because if you do, it's going to destroy you. You're going to be hurt. And so Jesus goes to Peter and says, no, you cannot think like that. If you are nothing more than Satan. You have to be away from me. And I'm sure that Peter is just distraught. He's just, the wind just gets blown out of him. He's like, oh, I did it again. So I wanted to think about what is it that is so dangerous about what Peter said. Because Jesus, and we're going to look at a couple just quick stories about kind of illustrating this important worldview, this attitude, this life choice, this way of looking at the world that can either build up our faith or undermine our faith. And so first we can look at the initial response of Jesus. Because Jesus obviously is very frustrated with Peter and the other disciples in this conversation. So he basically says to them, hey, if you want to be one of my followers, you're going to have to lose your life. Because what does it gain for you to get the whole world and yet lose all of eternity? You're going to have to lose your life for me. And if you do so, then you will live like you've never lived before. That's the response that Jesus gives to Peter. So somehow this attitude that Peter has, this crippling attitude that it's the same attitude that the Pharisees has, that Peter has to get rid of. It has to do with him being at the center of everything. You got to lose your identity as that you are important, that you are, everything revolves around you, that you are the center of your life. You got to lose your life. Instead, you got to replace it with me. And if you do, then you get to live like you never even dreamed of. The Apostle Paul, in our reading, our New Testament reading, was from Romans chapter 12. And in that, chapter 12, Paul is responding to the same question about how do we follow Jesus? What are the attitudes that we have to have? What is the mindset that we have to have? And he gives us all these practical answers about do not repay evil for good, love one another. There's some great, great attitudes and examples. But Romans 12 starts off with a preamble, a statement that has to guide your attitude about your relationship with Jesus and everything, if you want to adopt all those things that Paul so beautifully illustrates in our New Testament reading. And I wanted to read for you what it was, because we didn't get a chance to read it, because it comes right at the beginning of chapter 12. And this comes from Eugene Peterson's translation of Romans 12, 1 and 2. And this is how he translates it. So here's what I want you to do. God helping you take your everyday, ordinary life. You're sleeping, you're eating, you're going to work, you're walking around life, and place it before God as an offering. Embrace what God does for you. The best thing that you can do for him. Don't become so well adjusted to your culture that you fit into it without even thinking. Instead, fix your attention on God and you'll be changed from the inside out. That's his words. That's how he paraphrases Romans 12, 1 and 2. Don't be so fixated on your own culture that you don't even see how it is taking over your attitude, your relationships, your choices, the way you live. Instead, focus on God. That's Paul's preamble. Take your life and make it a living sacrifice, a living act of worship. As part of the dialogues that I mentioned that Jesus was having with the Pharisees that got him so frustrated that led him to wanting to make sure the disciples didn't adopt their attitude. As part of the discussion that happened in Matthew 9, one of the Pharisees asked Jesus, why do you hang out with sinful people? Why are you eating the home of a tax collector? Why do you do all this stuff that you do? And Jesus' response to them is, go and look up. I desire mercy over sacrifice. That's all he says to him in his response. And Jesus is quoting Micah. He's quoting one of the Old Testament prophets about God's message to Israel when Israel had gone off course. And in order to understand that and this whole dialogue about why Jesus is so concerned with the attitude of the Pharisees that Peter is adopting in this gospel passage read today, is we have to get at this idea of what sacrifice was. Sacrifice was an act of worship in the culture of Israel. It's when people came and they said, this is my worship. I am acting in worship. And what God's response was through Micah, very early on, the prophet, which Jesus is then quoting in his dialogue with the Pharisees, which Jesus is then trying to get across to the disciples, is this. What God wants is not just single acts of worship that make you feel better about yourself. What God wants is your whole heart. And in order to do this, focus on something other than just your acts of worship. Just focus on something else besides you in your own self-righteousness. Instead, show mercy. That's what God was telling the people through the prophet Micah. That's what Jesus echoes in his words. Get rid of you being at the center of your life and instead show mercy. It's powerful. I think about this idea that we're supposed to present our lives as living acts of worship, but we're supposed to focus on mercy, not just our own self-righteous acts of worship. I'm thinking about that, and it all sounds good. We've heard this before, right? So what stops us? Why is it that it's so hard for us to be able to think about the words that Jesus said? Why do we fall so much into the thinking of our culture that tells us that we are at the center of everything? And then I saw this quote today. Someone posted it on Facebook. Actually, I saw it this past week. Barbara Brown Taylor has this quote. And bring up the quote if you can. And it goes like this. Fear of death always turns into fear of life, into a stingy, cautious way of living that is not really living at all. To follow Jesus means going beyond the limits of our own comfort and safety. Next page. It means receiving our lives as gifts instead of guarding them as possessions. Isn't that an awesome quote? The fear of death invariably leads to the fear of life. And so often we are so afraid of death. We're so afraid of something bad happening to us that that fear captures our hearts and it stops us from really, really living. It stops us because we hold on to our life as a possession, something that we have to add to, something that glorifies us, something that is going to be our legacy or something like that. Instead of understanding this concept that Jesus said, you got to give away your life. You got to embrace me. And then you get to live like you never lived before. Can I share one more story with you? Can you bear with me for just a little bit longer? I saw a great example of this idea of focusing and embracing mercy instead of acts of worship in our lives. And this is a woman who was blogging about how she began helping out at a food shelter. When my husband and I moved to North Carolina, a friend invited me to join her cook team at the local soup kitchen. Initially, I went because I thought the experience would be good for me, making me more aware of my blessings and increase my compassion for those who are less fortunate. Wrong attitude. Why? Notice the prominence of me, mine, and I in the above sentence. My acts of sacrifice were all about me. They were my acts of worship. As the months passed, my attitude changed. Seeing some of the folks in the serving line twice a month led to conversations. How are you feeling this week, Marie? Is your cold gone? Have your new meds made it easier for you to sleep tonight, Raymond? When are they going to do that surgery on your finger, buddy? A few months later, I started giving the pre-lunch devotion once a month. Before I blessed the food, I asked for prayer requests. Listening to what was on people's hearts drew me closer to them. Praying for them planted their needs and concerns in my heart. I made sure Billy got a can of Mountain Dew he preferred, and I reminisced with Barbara, who grew up in my hometown. I chatted with Donnie when I cut his meat because he couldn't do it with his misshapen right hand. I was so glad to see you, and the hugs multiplied. What happened? I developed relationships. These folks became dear to me. Going to the soup kitchen wasn't an act of sacrifice. It was a place where I hung out. People I cared about. It was a place where I belonged. It's a powerful story. What began as just her act of worship, her wanting to do something about her own life and her own relationship with God by going and volunteering at a soup kitchen, when she changed her attitude and said, it's not about me and my act of worship. Instead, it's about these people that God has brought into my life. She started to learn people's names. She started to understand how they tick, what their concerns were, what their burdens were. She couldn't solve their problems. She could be part of their lives. She could show love and mercy towards them. Even the small acts of mercy, like cutting a man's meat because he can't cut it on his own. That is what happens when we embrace mercy. That's when we look at our lives and we say, you know, everything that we do, everything that happens in our lives is a chance, is an opportunity to show mercy. It's not about me. It's not about my life and how I get to develop my relationship with God and how I can make myself look better and how I can experience the power of God. It's about how I can show mercy to people. In fact, throughout what we've said today, there are two faith practices that we encounter in these texts today that can help us. And they help us specifically when we think about what happened in Houston this past week, about this tragedy, about how we respond, about where is God, about why did this happen. Because we don't have all the answers for people. But what we know is that people have been left destitute. Destitute means that you no longer have the necessities for life. And many people have been left destitute. The reality is that people are left destitute every day of the year. And it's not just physically destitute. People are left emotionally destitute and spiritually destitute. All around us, people are like that. And if we embrace mercy, if we embrace what Jesus is saying, and instead of thinking of our lives as being our possession and being afraid to live because we're so afraid to die, we take this promise of Jesus that says, you don't have to worry about dying anymore because I have gifted you eternal life. And if we just understand that promise, then what happens is we're no longer afraid of death. Now we're no longer afraid to live. And if we're no longer afraid to live, then we can take risks. We can embrace mercy. And we can look at every opportunity in our lives, everything that happens, as an opportunity to show mercy to someone. To find someone who is destitute, emotionally, physically, spiritually, whatever, in our lives. We'll go to Houston because there's a lot of people down there that are in that situation. We can say, okay, I can't solve your problems. I can show you mercy. Amen? Two faith practices that are illustrated in what we talk about today. The first one is this. Build a life centered on mercy. Everything that happens is an opportunity to show mercy. Remember that. Adopt that attitude. It's a great faith practice. Everything that happens throughout this week, everything you hear about, every single thing is an opportunity to show mercy in some shape, some form, in some way. Especially every person you meet is an opportunity to bring mercy into their lives. You can't solve their problems. You can bring mercy. And it makes all the difference in the world. And the second is this. Everything in your life is worship. Move beyond acts of worship and make a connection with someone who is destitute. And that comes from that story about that woman who went to the soup kitchen. And instead of doing acts that were centered around herself and made herself feel good, she started making connections with people, having relationships with people. And that made all the difference in the world. Let's stand for our song of the day.